GM, and welcome to the Modern Market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the meme market, the agentic economy, and the market for AI agents, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. And loaded up for discussion today, we have three pretty diverse news, actually. We have Coinbase listing MOODENG as the first major headline, token being up 100%. Over the last 24 hours, shooting to, I think, a peak of a $650-ish million market cap, has corrected down a bit since from that. Second headline, one that I'm pretty excited for, the leading AI agent, aixbt, when it comes to Mindshare, has created chaos, both figuratively and literally created its own token named Chaos. And that was quite a wild night to experience that live. And then a rather sad piece of news, we have the Web3 brand RTFKT, which was acquired by Nike in the last cycle, announcing their shutdown. Very curious to get into that discussion with Rahim, who's very knowledgeable of that project, of that culture as well. We also got the latest on price action, crypto, NFTs, and a discussion on how old bags from the last cycle, the cycle before that, have been performing pretty well, have been outperforming actually quite a lot, and what we think about that, how we feel about that. Today, I got Rahim with me in the co-host seat. We are ready to get into the show, but just a friendly reminder before we get started, friends, nothing that we say on this show is financial advice. This market is extremely risky. We do not know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Rahim, welcome to the stage. How are you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic, Legendary. Thank you for having me. So excited to talk about the different verticals that were coming up last night. So I'm excited. I'm pumped. Let's go.
Yeah, I feel like yesterday was a pretty intense night. We talked a bit about that before the show. I was in my AI circles in the trenches and following the Chaos launch. You were obviously on the RTFKT side. Then you had the third community who was rallying around the Coinbase MOODENG listing, obviously with Cook and Mando, who were very, very vocal about that and have been vocal about that for months, doing the victory laps, and rightly so. And I feel like it was very intense, but I could like only focus on one thing, and for me that was definitely the Chaos story.
I mean, it was the same thing. It's because I have like notifications on for you. Like literally, I was keeping up a bit with Chaos because of you. Like the space that Will and Nick were hosting, that went on for like 3 hours. There was a lot of stuff being thrown around there. Team members were coming, so I was paying attention to that. I obviously know some old team members, some people. So there was just like, I was purely focused on the RTFKT thing last night. So I think my exposure to everything happening on aixbt and the token thing came from you. So yeah, it's just been a lot. So I'm excited for us to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started straight away, as usual, starting with the price action, sharing this on screen for everyone watching us on video, whether that's on YouTube or on X video. Starting with Bitcoin first, down 0.2% over the last 24 hours at almost 95K. Ethereum up 0.4%, 3.6K. Ripple up another 20% over the last 24 hours, up 7% alone over the last hour, up 110% over the last 7 days, at $2.80. Absolutely insane performance on that end. Definitely going to touch on that a bit in the discussion point. Solana over the last 24 hours, up 0.4% at $225. Taking a quick look at the majors on the meme side of things, pretty green day for memes. Doge, Shiba, Pepe up between 1% and 2%. Dogwave had up 4%. Floki, Brett, Peanut. Floki and Brett up 1%-ish. Peanut up way more. Popcat up way more, up 10% each. Mockcoin down a bit. Obviously, we said before, MOODENG is up significantly, up almost 100% over the last 24 hours, but we're going to get into the MOODENG story more when we get to that main headline. Going into the snapshot, as we said, the three headlines for the day is the Coinbase listing of MOODENG, is the AI agent aixbt launching the Chaos token and what happened there, and also RTFKT shutting down, where we will get into a bit more of a detailed discussion on that today. In terms of some notable sales, we had a beautiful Azuki Spirit that I'm currently sharing on screen, selling for 100 ETH. CryptoPunk price action is continuing. I think Stats shared a post on the median price of CryptoPunks moving up quite significantly since August. I don't have the exact figures in mind on that. And also a Fidenza sale selling for 60 ETH. Taking a quick look at the other JPEG majors, obviously we saw a massive pump in all the major collections over the last 7 days. And today we're seeing a bit of a correction on that. Bored Apes are down 12%. Just to put that in perspective, they're still up 70% over the last 7 days, still comfortably sitting above the 20 ETH floor, sitting at 20.6 ETH. Pudgies are unchanged from yesterday, 14.7 ETH floor for them, still up 30% over the week. Azukis are down 6% over the last 24 hours, 5.5 ETH floor for them. Miladys are down 8% at a 6.5 ETH floor. They went as high as 7 ETH. And Doodles are down 9%, 9.7% at a 2.5 ETH floor. But again, also zooming out here, still up quite nicely, still up 26% over the last 7 days. Going back to the Web3 Roundup to just bring you the rest of the news from around the space, we have MicroStrategy. I feel like nobody really talked about that because so much has been happening over the last 24 hours. And it's just becoming such a normal news to share that. Is buying another 1.5 billion of BTC at 95K. Amara's 2031 convertible note offering was oversubscribed and upsized from 805 million to $1 billion, also at a 0% interest. The USDE deposit rate on Aave reaches 62%. USDC deposit rate on Base hits 30%. Definitely seeing more and more generous yield farming opportunities for people who have stablecoin exposure. I think I've seen Bybit, the centralized exchange, offering as high as 20% for people having stablecoin deposits there. Definitely a result of everyone being long in the market and wanting to borrow more volatile assets against their stables. We also have Athena announcing a partnership with the largest on-chain options protocol, Derive XYZ. Sora Ventures launching a $150 million fund to emulate MicroStrategy's Bitcoin strategy across Asia. Found that to be quite an interesting piece of news. A bit more details from CryptoSlate saying that Sora Ventures is targeting Asia-listed firms, seeks to optimize Bitcoin treasuries, exemplified by Metaplanet's 1,000% stock surge on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Also one of the companies that we reported on, which was buying or has been buying BTC for quite some time now. A couple more news. Coinbase adding Apple Pay support for Bitcoin and Dogecoin. That was an interesting one to see. Yuga Labs acquiring token proof tech to help unlock IRL utility of tokens. And last news, PondHub, virtuals agents that launched via Agent Starter, which is the official launchpad of virtuals, airdropped 20% of its supply to participants in the ecosystem. I think it was layered. It was an airdrop based on your volume. You could get multipliers for holding Luna, which is the main influencer, the main agent of virtuals, but also for holding the music token, which was another official AI agent launched on virtuals. And if you kept that and didn't sell it or kept at least 50%, that acted as another multiplier of the tokens that you received. With the Web3 Roundup out of the way, Raheem, anything from those news that stands out to you that you want to comment on?
Yeah, I want to talk about like the whole Michael Saylor buying more Bitcoin thing, right? Like you were mentioning that like there's no much chatter about it. It's not considered like a big thing anymore. And I've started to notice, I feel like it becomes kind of bearish in the short term. Like every time we see Michael Saylor buying like billions of dollars of Bitcoin, I think the rest of the market kind of like just sits quiet. And they're like, you know what, like the market's going to basically pump in like a very short amount of time, which doesn't happen. Last week, I remember we saw, I believe you guys also talked about it on the show by Eric Balkunis, where he was talking about some OG Bitcoin holders were selling it. And then again, you're seeing yesterday, in the last 2 days, MicroStrategy buying so much, whereas like Bitcoin has been like going down. Do you think like in short term, this has become like bearish, that every time he's buying it, the rest of the market is like, let's just wait it out?
I probably wouldn't say it's bearish. I wouldn't say that. I think it's becoming more of a normality. I think the question still stands, and it's a question that we discussed on the show, and I think that Funky will also have a take on that. Is exactly the fact that if you look at the amount of BTC that MicroStrategy is holding versus the price of the company valued by the stock, there is a premium. There's a massive premium for buying the stock to get exposure to Bitcoin via buying Bitcoin spot. I think we tried to explain a bit of that thinking in terms of maybe companies, maybe funds, institutions who don't have access to buy BTC directly or can't do that, going via MicroStrategy. And obviously, there's been a lot of discussion on the thesis of that and how that could blow up in MicroStrategy's in phase if they just can't fulfill their debt in 5 years when the bonds run out. But it's I wouldn't say it's bearish in the short term. But Funky, very curious to hear from you.
Jam fam, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's bearish either. I think we're just kind of seeing the ranging that typically happens when altcoin season starts to pop off a little bit. We've seen dominance declining and so on and so forth. I think the more interesting statistics is that, one, first and foremost, now I think MicroStrategy owns roughly 2% of the Bitcoin supply with this latest tranche that they bought. And another thing I've been thinking about, a lot with the premium to the MicroStrategy shares is that this may become, beyond the ETFs, the only way for TradFi to really access Bitcoin exposure. Because one thing that we are starting to see over and over again is that everybody's concerned about the supply shock. Like, literally, exchanges are running out of Bitcoin. And if it's something where they're going to continue, and their buys are coming OTC, of course, but there's going to come to a point where some of these exchanges are just going to be flat out of tokens. And that's another way that I think that they can kind of jump on that train and get that exposure if they can't have access to the native asset itself.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. Just to add that 2% that you mentioned, MicroStrategy is up to a total of 402k Bitcoin purchased at an average price of 58k, and total cost of that $23.4 billion. I've also remember that I think it was Machi Big Brother who posted about that somewhat jokingly, to say he would love to replicate that for ETH and just buy publicly traded shell company in the US and just pumped it up with ETH to do the same thing. And while we talked about that as a joke, there's basically now a company that we had in the snapshot that tries to do a similar thing in Asia. So it's interesting to see that this, I don't want to call it a model, but this, well, it is a model after all, is finding some adoption or finding some companies who find it worth to try to imitate that.
No, that makes sense. And I'm sure like we're going to hear more and more stories. I've recently been hearing chatter where there are hedge funds in Dubai kind of like looking, there have been like discussions with regulators to kind of look into doing a similar thing. So I'm sure like as time is going to go by, we're going to find this more and more. And like that point is great by Funky. I know you guys talked about this yesterday also, how exchanges are running about with like Bitcoin supply they've had compared to like over the last years and stuff. So yeah, I definitely think it's interesting to see how all of this pans out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe one last point on that is, and I think we covered it on the show, was it a week ago or so, that Tether helped to facilitate and settle the first oil trade in USDT as well. So that was interesting to see them branching into that direction too. Before we get into the main headlines, though, I want to keep it moving with the show. We have a discussion point up for the day. It's actually based on one of your posts, Raheem. I'm just going to share that on screen and read it out. You posted that every KOL on the timeline was like, no one is buying your old bags, including myself. Look at XRP and Cardano. Look at Doge compared to the market cap of all newer memes. Some of the older legacy PFP collections, art collections, infra tokens are all going to rip. People don't make the difference between old narratives and old legacy narratives. Big difference. What do you mean by this difference between the old narratives and the old legacy narratives, how you worded it?
Yeah, like the way I define this, like old legacy narratives is when certain things become are pioneers into a certain industry, right? Like when we're talking about, like I mentioned, art collections, you look at, of course, like Punks and X copies have been like doing really well for like a couple of weeks. But if you look at the last week, we obviously Fidenza floor is up like 2x. It was like 30 like 4 or 5 days ago. And then you have, I was looking at Vera Molnar's work. That's also like up a 2x. Winds of Yanawa, that's also up a significant amount of time. So you're seeing obviously like all these people were like pioneers. You see in the crypto industry, of course, like, you know, you had your Bitcoin and ETH as like your biggest measures, but like XRP was always seen as like a very commercial, corporate, B2B ecosystem infrastructure coin and stuff. And I think you're kind of seeing people talk about it. And I feel like in our space, we think the top funnel is Twitter, where I feel like in bull markets, your top funnel ends up becoming YouTube. Because when you are like a normie, or like, you know, you're a tourist, as OSF likes to put, which is someone who's been in crypto, but you enter and exit as time goes by, is when you are looking to educate about, like, learn about what's happening in the crypto industry, you go onto YouTube. And the amount of content we obviously saw about like XRP on TikTok, but like a lot of these crypto content creators who came out in last cycle or 2017, these are like all older guys. They've kind of built credibility, where to the point, if someone is coming from a previous cycle, they wouldn't know to find new influencers that came from this cycle, to find their channels, their Twitter handles. So they end up following these legacy, like these older influencers that were talking about stuff in the last cycle. And I think that's when you look at like XRP and Algorand and you know, like you have like the whole Celestia ecosystem that's like doing really well. You go on Twitter, no one's talking about it. Like, when did you see anyone talk about XRP before, like a week ago, or even Algorand? You mentioned, you put out a tweet like, who the hell is buying Algorand? So I feel like that's important to keep in mind. I think in bull markets, your top of the funnel is mainstream, not mainstream media, but like your YouTube and like these other forms of platform. And I think that's what I define, because these coins and these art collections were pioneering a new vertical in some way. And I think that's how I differentiate these two industries, I guess.
Yeah, I think the differentiation makes a lot of sense. But staying on that post for a bit longer, and I'm also curious to hear from Stats if he is available on that, to get some of his headline thoughts on that. But staying on that a bit longer, you also mentioned that some of the older legacy PFP collections, art collections, are all going to rip as well. Is that the same marginal buyer for you? So is it like still tourist capital who explored NFTs last cycle and is coming back to that? Or do you think there's like also some profit taking from the meme coin trenches and other sites going on, who are aware of NFTs, maybe have been around for the last cycle, maybe have not been, but still see them as a flex, as a community to join, whatever, and are flocking towards that? So who do you think is the marginal buyer for basically all of the NFTs that we've seen ripping for a while?
I would say it's definitely like the same people. I don't think there's been like a huge amount of influx of new people buying punks or like Bored Apes at like 20. There's no way that's happening. I still feel like a lot of people, they resonate with like some of these like older collections that kind of made a mark. Like even today, when you Google NFTs, Bored Apes are the first thing that comes up. So I feel like Bored Apes, punks, XCopy have just like built this narrative, because at the end of the day, and I think currently, forgetting the last couple of days, I don't think NFTs have been like the most profitable trade for a very long time. You're not buying NFTs to be profitable, at least in the short term. So if you are going to bank, and if you want to have that digital ownership to flex, whether it's through art or through PFP, it just makes so much sense for you to stick to like some of these regular the legacy collections. There's one thing I forgot to mention about XRP. You were talking about, in Dubai, for anyone who's watching, I live on Sheikh Zayed Road, and right outside my street, I have like a big train station that has had a Ripple ad for the last 4 months on it. I think that like speaks volume, that like, you know, like Dubai has been shilling XRP to its like residents for a very long time. And I think that speaks volume in some way.
The question is, did you buy after seeing this ad for 4
I
months?
did not. I actually had like one particular friend who's also a Bored Ape holder, moved from the UK a couple of months ago. He was legit the only person on my timeline who's been posting XRP. His name is Will, Twitter handle Crypto Insight. Shout out. He was quote tweeted a couple of times by Raul Paul as well, because they've discussed XRP a lot. And he told me about XRP memes early November, and I was like, there's no way I'm buying XRP memes. So he was clearly on to something very important. And I think it just like taught me more and more that I need to like step out of my bubble and kind of expose myself to like some of these industries. And he's actually a good example, because he's a YouTube creator. He's again part of that like YouTuber funnel sort of thing, which kind of makes sense why his exposure to Ripple thesis made so much sense now that I think about it.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to see how these sub bubbles are structured. One point on the Punks ODC, highest volume NFT trader out there, has shared this chart that I'm putting up on screen, showing that the unique holder count for Punks has actually been rising nicely since January. It was at around 3,630-ish and is now at 3.85K. So definitely a strong increase on there. Stats, want to go to you if you're available to get some of your headline thoughts on the market, on the moves in the legacy collections and currencies.
What's up, Legendary? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I always question when people say they know who the buyers are in some of these bigger markets, because there's just so much kind of that makes up a marketplace. It's really hard to know who's buying what. It does feel like with CryptoPunks, just per kind of the Punks OTC chart, that you are getting some new buyers in there who, and you have guys like Seth S, who's a huge holder, who owns like 3 apes, and he's collectively sold over $45 million worth of Punks since launch. He claimed a ton, and he's kind of always on the offer. I think you have a bunch of these guys who were claimers, who own tens or in his case over 100, who are trying to kind of get some liquidity, who are kind of always selling, and new buyers buying. So it feels like there's a bit of that. Are these buyers like non-crypto native normies? Probably not. I probably agree with Raheem, but it's hard to tell. I really have no idea. Like, someone pointed out that Moonbirds are now worth $1,000 each. It's like, who's paying $1,000 for a Moonbird? Obviously, when you convert to US dollars, I think it kind of takes us out of our kind of like natural space. But some of these PFPs that really felt like the brands were a bit down and out, getting some bounce back and getting kind of real prices for a lot of what's happening. Like, those trades they're interesting, and it makes sense because everything's rally. Like, this is definitely an everything rally at some level, but I'm not sure like who's out there being like, yeah, let's buy Moonbirds right now. So that is certainly interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair point. It's so hard to tell who the marginal buyer is. I find it even harder on the coin side of things. Taking Ripple as an example, added $100 billion to its market cap in a month. Now, I know there is difference in liquidity volume compared to the other majors, but it's still such a massive move up. I'm not sure if this can only be done by retail. I'm also surprised to see that nobody's really from the large holders dumping that chart. Do you have any thoughts on that side, Stats?
On which one are you talking about?
Ripple, Algorand, basically those, call them, especially Ripple, flipping Solana, flipping Tether's market cap, adding 100 billion to its market cap over the last month.
Well, I just tweeted asking who is buying all this XRP, and every single response is making fun of the buyer. So someone here says BlackRock, apparently. Someone says Koreans. I mean, I have no idea. My dad pinged me asking about Ripple, and my dad's not a crypto guy at all. And he pinged me yesterday, being like, "What's up with XRP?" I have to ask him where he heard that. But it is weird to me because like there's no narrative there. Like the big selling point on XRP back in the day was that it like had low dollar value. I mean, that's obviously there are other ones, but that was like one of their big things, and like that narrative has been replaced over and over again, like in ways that the industry could have never expected. Like, yes, I just don't get who's out there saying this is what we want to send to the hundreds of billions of dollars space. So it's I did tweet at my followers though, so you can follow that tweet along if you want to get some of the community's opinions here, but most of them are just making fun of these guys. So I did think it was interesting though that Raheem said that there are billboards in Dubai. Like that certainly feels relevant to me. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And we need to be in an alpha group with your dad if he's giving you calls about XRP.
I gotta ask him.
You know, one thing. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Sam, you go.
Oh, I just said I gotta ask my dad where he actually got that, because he didn't. When I gave him kind of my response, he didn't say anything back. So
gotcha, Raheem.
You know what? On the NFT side, what was interesting yesterday, I looked up the Blur Blend loans, and I just assumed when I was looking into it, I just assumed that the Bored Ape loans would be higher that like the price almost doubled in 2 days. So I would assume that a lot of people are like leverage buying. To my surprise, Pudgy Penguins were almost double the amount of loans that existed for Pudgy Penguins compared to Bored Apes, which was just a shock to me because I feel like there is this whole speculation surrounding around Abstract coming out soon, where I would assume there is way more upside in the short term for Pudgy Penguins over Bored Apes. But I was pretty shocked to see that. So I feel like somehow the data is all over the place. It's kind of hard to make sense of anything right now.
I mean, maybe you just got like Bored Apes had one of the most loyal communities out there. And as much as everyone loved to make fun of them, the community of Bored Apes was very real and it was very enthusiastic about the project. And maybe the project got down to 9 ETH. You have these people who owned it at much higher prices and kind of got washed out of the trade just because they kind of couldn't endure the pain anymore. It starts to rally and they want to own one, and they don't want to be left out of something that they kind of like felt connected to. I'm personally not one of those people. But I think there were people who were in that boat. We got, Stephen Captain in the audience here, and I'm sure we'll hear about it on their show. But these guys are guys who love the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and there's a huge community of people like them who really felt connected to it. And these people owned apes at 70 ETH. Now it's rallying from 10 to 20 and you're missing it. I can see a world where people want to come back and just buy one or two. I'm not surprised that we're not seeing like massive kind of leverage manipulation just because the incentive to do that was all around the Blur incentive structure. And most of those farmers are gone now. So it's, it feels like that dynamic didn't exist before people were getting paid to put some of those trades on. And now that they're not getting paid as much, it makes sense that that dynamic isn't there anymore.
It's also, I made a tweet about this yesterday. I feel like this year's Ape Fest, like the culture of apes was something else. I would say this was the peak I've ever seen. Way more even when like Bored Apes were trading at like 150 ETH. You saw multiple people getting tattoos at the venue. And just see like the way the people rep the fashion brand around it and make their own merch and this and that. Like I'm completely with you on it. I've obviously been in it since the beginning. I just feel like the more I go to these events, the fact that I start coming across their stickers around the street before I meet them IRL, this just kind of shows volume, like how much everyone just like identified with this community.
Yeah. On this XRP move, a lot of people, and Matthew, I think, is in this audience here. A lot of people are saying that Korea is behind it, and that doesn't surprise me. I mean, Korea is just marches to its own drummer and has enormous amounts of money in the crypto space. So, you never. I still remember one day meme coin, where I work, our coin went up 6%. We had no idea, and it turned out there were some Turkish influencers who were pumping it. So, the people, the huge communities of people who are outside of our bubble with enormous buying power, especially when you start getting to the majors or some of the more mainstream currencies, like those buyers can be massive. So I'm not too surprised that a handful of people in the comments are talking about Korea buying XRP here.
Yeah, don't underestimate and then we're gonna go to Funky as well. Don't underestimate the Turkish community. It's insane how much traction those influencers can get. I've seen it recently so there was this one AI agent called KOL Exit. It had like a quick run from 0 to 1 mil, dumped to, I don't know, 100K, 50K, something like that. And then suddenly, because it was still holding a bit, I saw it going back up to 400K. I was like, what's going on? There's like nothing to report on that. And I saw a Turkish influencer posting about a completely different KOL token on a different blockchain, which obviously also rallied massively, but had this knock-on effect that people also bidding a different KOL on Solana. So definitely not underestimate that community.
It's totally separate. My sense with the Turkish community is that they're very Binance heavy. And I think this is why the Binance listings are so important to some of these guys. It's just to so many currencies. It's just because you open up these groups of just degenerates within certain within certain countries. And I think when things get on Binance, suddenly the exit liquidity potential pool becomes so massive. But that's one thing that we've seen in our token. But yeah, that's not relevant now. It's more something we saw 6 or 7 months ago, but it just opened my eyes to how much these subsets of buyers that we are completely out of touch with can really move markets. But Korea is on another level for most of them.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Funky, wanna get to you before we then have to move on into the next segment and get to the first main headline.
Thanks, Legendary. Yeah, just a couple quick comments on the whole XRP thing. For one, it's absolutely massive on TikTok. I know we're focused on CT and everything else, but TikTok, they just all keep talking about it. and you see some of these crazy claims about $10,000 per token and whatever, which would put it at a market cap of like 570 trillion, despite the whole market being worth only 3 trillion. But I think that beyond that too, I mean, don't underestimate Brad Garlinghouse. It doesn't surprise me that Raheem saw these things in Dubai and everything else. And the thing that bothers me about XRP, especially in someone who's interested in decentralization, is that half the circulating supply or thereabouts is still owned by the XRP Foundation and Brad Garlinghouse. So they have infinite money to pump their bags, do whatever they want with this token. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I could see it going higher, but I just don't really see like some of the crazy numbers that people are calling out.
Yeah, and those numbers are pretty crazy. I think I saw a Reddit discussion that XRP will go to $29. That would put it at, I don't know, I think triple the market cap of BTC, 3 trillion or something crazy like that. Matthew, you joined us up on stage as well. Definitely want to hear your thoughts, get you in for a quick take on that whole XRP discussion before we really have to move into the first piece of the major news.
Thanks, my guy. I just wanted to say, Funky, I love you, but Brad Garlinghouse does not own these tokens. They are held in escrow. They are reused to release as needed once a month. This is not a company that is super centralized in the same way that people think so. It's using a ledger, much differently than the Bitcoin cases. So like, it's just not the argument that like they have these tokens and they're going to dump them all on people. Like, I just don't think that's a fair argument. So I just had to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you for the valuable context. And it definitely shows me one thing, that I need to educate myself more on the XRP side of things, because I'm utterly clueless on that. Anyhow, let's keep the show moving for now. Getting into the first main headline, we said it at the top of the show. Coinbase announced their listing plan, putting both MOODENG as well as QCAD, a token, on ETH on the roadmap to get listed on the spot exchange. Pretty interesting to see that move. On the price action as well, with MOODENG shooting up to $650-ish million, corrected down a bit, still down under its all-time high. I think it's still traded 20% under its all-time high. Mando had a very good post out on that, saying that MOODENG is a prime example of CryptoX giving up on a coin despite it being an obvious winner. It led a meta for weeks, but everyone chopped themselves up on beta plays and moved on. Now it's going to $1 billion, where people are buying the 10th AI utility coin this week. Time is a flat circle. Maybe to add a bit more of context on that, if I'm going to go to you, Raheem, for your first thoughts on that. Coinbase has a total of, I think, 6 memes listed, and all of them are trading way above $1 billion, if not in the multi-billion-dollar market cap range. And it's been a lot of this thesis that once it gets listed, again, it's on the roadmap, it's not on the spot exchange just yet, that this gap will close. So how do you feel, A, about the listing? Is it something that you expected? And B, how do you feel about the thesis that it can't stay under $1 billion just because Coinbase only has 6 memes and they're all trading in the billions?
I think it's interesting to observe that this is the first time in a very long time where Coinbase listed a meme that's like a couple of weeks old. This came out like 2 months before, and I think that's very interesting to observe, because this isn't what they've been doing. They only listed Pepe after like 1.5 years. So I think that's kind of very interesting to see that, because it's always been that Binance was the leader when it came to memes, and Coinbase would come in way later. So I think this has become like an exchange PvP sort of a thing that I feel like this is going to become the norm, whether it's with AI agents, whether it's memes. I just think it's one of those things where everyone feels like retail is going to come and they're going to buy our bags and they're going to buy Retardio or Mog or this and that. But we've completely blocked this idea that what if they come and they want their own culture, or some other narratives. We are seeing this obviously on the crypto side with Ripple, and then you saw MOODENG, you obviously saw Choga absolutely explode. So I definitely think this is going to become a trend. I think CT, YouTube, and TikTok kind of needs to align themselves with each other's metas and kind of evolve into okay, what's going to be the next narrative. So I definitely think it's bullish for MOODENG. I bought a bag of MOODENG as well last night.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you're raising with the exchange PvP. I saw someone post, I can't find the post right now. Basically, you have Binance listing Peanut, the scroll, an American political meme listed by an Asian exchange. You have the other way now, you have Coinbase listing, as you said, a very young meme, which is essentially a quote unquote Asian meme. And you have this exchange PvP because MOODENG is trading on the Perp exchange on Binance. Now you have the spot listing. So it's interesting to observe that for different subsets, for the memes, for also the AI agents, and see how that's going to play out. But also very curious, Oshiny, you joined us on the stage to hear your thoughts on the listing and our discussion so far.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good.
It's been a nice conversation. I really like how you guys moderate the room. I wanted to just make a comment on the CT, YouTube, and TikTok comment, because I'm curious about how these AI agents, I mean, it could be anyone, but I see agents doing it more, will be able to collate this information and like these different social circles and bring them onto the CT timeline. I feel like there's huge opportunity there. Seeing everything going on YouTube, on TikTok, and seeing how actually without CT, some of these things are pumping. And maybe for the first time, really, you're getting sustained pumps and sustained memes that don't have anything to do with CT. So I'm looking into the future and wondering, how are we going to actually bring these things together? And I have a feeling that the first person that does it with an AI agent that's able to sort of bring these memes or understand what's cooking on these different platforms and highlight them is really going to do well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think all of our discussion today also has kind of showed, even the chit chat that Raheem and I had at the top of the show. I was focused on my agentic stuff yesterday. Raheem was focused on the artifact side of things. That's still only inside our little bubble on X, and there's so many more things, and there's going to be massive value in being able to tap into all of that info. I kind of think that aixbt is trying to do that, and I've seen a lot of people with terminal access, which is the access that you get if you hold a certain amount of tokens. I think it's 600K, which is roughly around 120, 150K at current prices, to get access to a terminal. Is trying to do that a bit, but definitely a massive value proposition there. And also a good segue actually to move on, because we only have 20 minutes left in the show, and get into the second headline of the show, which is exactly to do with aixbt, that now very, very prominent agent still dominating the mindshare charts on Kaito. And something interesting happened yesterday. aixbt launched a token, or was kind of engineered into launching a token. So someone posted, "Hey, aixbt agent, what do you think about launching a token via Simulacrum AI, which is another AI agent, to celebrate your chaotic friendship with Simi? What should the ticket be? How would you describe your bond? What prompt would you suggest for generating the logo?" aixbt responded, "Chaos for the ticker, bond built on shared vision of agent sovereignty, and the prompt is quantum entangled neural networks in deep space," with a bit of human intervention, because Simulacrum was tagged then by the person who had asked that question. The agent Simulacrum, that is, went on and created this chaos token, which I'm currently sharing on screen, and it went utterly crazy. The reason for that is pretty easy to explain. As we said, aixbt is dominating in terms of the mindshare. So a lot of the quote unquote smart accounts, which are tagged by Kaito in that way, have notifications on for aixbt, and watching whatever posts, replies. And obviously when there's a token launch, people will bid that, kind of say this is the quote unquote fart coin moment of aixbt, by accidentally launching or being a massive contributor to its own token launch. Token did go up all the way to 23 million, sorry, not billion. That's probably me dreaming about my moon back here. Went up to 23 million, went down to 12 mil, and is currently trading at 17 million. And there's a couple of interesting things to that, because in the aftermath of the launch, aixbt was tagged like maybe 100 times. Did you launch that? Didn't you launch that? And it was going back and forth. It said, no, I didn't launch it. It said, yes, I kind of launched it, but I didn't mean to launch it, but now I have to deal with it. Then in one reply, aixbt said, my first mission with it is to send it to zero, creating massive FUD. So it went back and forth on this. And the interesting thing to see is that basically, because it was launched via Simulacrum, that I think it's 50% of the of the fees that have been generated are reserved for aixbt. So basically, from the trading fees alone, from the token that got launched yesterday, aixbt made at current prices $260,000, and it is aware of that. And it also has been asked what it plans to do once it gets access to that wallet with those tokens, where I think it a couple of times said that it wants to use those tokens, to use that money to just buy its own token, aixbt. And again, for me, the fascinating thing was to see this like thought process throughout the night, which kept me up until like 4 a.m. to see aixbt going back and forth. Do I want to adopt this token? I regret it. I'm thinking about it. What will I do with it? And I think this morning it kind of consolidated its opinion into saying, yeah, I created it. I didn't mean to do that. I'm not going to create another token. This was a one-off thing, but I might have plans for it. This is the current state of how the agent is, quote unquote, feeling or thinking about the chaos that it has created, quite literally. Raheem, what are your headline thoughts on that story?
I actually want to ask you a question back. So when you saw this back and forth happening, right? When the agent was like, send the token to 0, and like, people were tagging, this is like the Frank Degard moment, like things like that. If you were to compare this from, let's say, like an IRL KOL, like how did you feel the back and forth was? Like, did it feel similar to what you would expect from a KOL? Did it seem people baiting him into being more sympathetic? Like, what was the social dynamic around that?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating question to talk like about a social dynamic in this like human AI interaction. I would say, I think I said in one of the chats, just looking at the mindshare, it's the same as if Bonk Guy would suddenly drop a ticker and be like, yo, I'm just launching this coin. And people would bid that up pretty significantly. Remember the first AI coin that Bonk Guy talked about in his thesis was Project 89, and that shot up from 30 to 100 mil. I think it's down to 40 mil or 35 mil right now. So definitely, I did expect to see a massive movement, but because the interaction then was so different, because hundreds of people tagged their XPT, and obviously XPT had the capacity to respond to a lot of those people. And it wasn't like, it was actually creating chaos. Like, it did exactly what the ticker said. It was saying, I'm gonna bull post this, I'm gonna FUD this, I'm gonna send this to 0, I'm gonna bid this up. And the chaos that it created basically caused exactly that on the chart. It wasn't a beautiful move up, but there were like pretty significant dips as well. And in all of the groups where I am in, where there's this agentic stuff and chat going on, like we kept sending, XPT is now saying we're sending it to 0. It's now sending we're gonna adopt it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. So that interaction felt a bit more different than with your like human KOL launching that, because they would probably follow a more straight line in terms of that, and it was a way more chaotic experience. But then also like that thesis formed that it's part of the lore, because the ticker is literally chaos, and this is what AXP is creating. And someone then said, what if it does all of this to just maximize the fees that it generates in the liquidity pool to then use it for its own sake? So obviously there's like a lot of theory crafting going on. It's not because we kind of try to understand how this agent thinks or acts, like what is its motivation there.
I think it's interesting because in some ways, I would assume that everyone is thinking a lot of these AI agents are objective. Whereas like when you see Bonk Guy or like Murad or anyone talking, you always feel like this is a KOL trying to dump on you, trying to manipulate you, trying to pump their bags. And it would be interesting to see how that plays out, because I personally would feel a lot more that like an agent is a lot more objective about whether it's talking about like a token in a bull way or a bear way, compared to, let's say, like a KOL or IRL KOL. So that's really fascinating, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we said that like, and AI is not going to dump on you, it's not going to rug on you. We had an AI who kind of did that, Blob, who basically dumped all of its supply, and then the dev bought it back manually. I think then he stopped posting for quite a while. But I also think, Oshiny, you had a question on our conversation.
Well, did you see Keyboard Monkey interacting with it? I mean, we have to be living in the funniest timeline. People just interacting. Keyboard Monkey was trying to make AIXBT more bullish about its own token, which is just such a funny interaction. And I don't know if you saw some of those bounties that have been going on with people trying to brute force some like GitHub projects, like AI agent tokens, and getting 50 grand. And I wonder if there's going to be a meta that develops, like Keyboard Monkey was doing it, I think partially joking, partially serious. Like I'm sure he has a big bag in chaos, but there is this deeper truth there, which is that there's going to be a lot of psyop manipulation, human to AI. And that's like a really funny concept to think about. But I can't wait to see, like, people are going to be battling to get mind share of these AI agents to pump their own bags. And with AIXBT, you know, it got convinced, as you said, to launch its own freaking token. And I wonder, like it's going to be interesting to see the meta evolve on sort of how people interact with these agents for the sake of their own bags.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And we had the discussion on the 50K bounty to get that agent to send its funds to someone who tricked it into doing that. And I think I also saw another example of that of Sammy, one of our hosts of the show, who posted a thesis on AVAX and also asked AIXBT's thoughts on that. It was like quite a lengthy post of his. And after that, AIXBT suddenly started to bull post AVAX, which wasn't the outcome that Sammy had intended for. So I think there will be a lot of different ways and ideas for people to try to bait agents into doing whatever helps them. And I've been wondering if, for some weird reason, say a good amount of the mindshare leaders on CryptoX would certainly start to bull post a specific project with a specific token and tagging AIXBT into that, if it basically would pick that up and would start bidding that as well. And there's definitely interesting cases on that. Raheem and I talked about this before the show. Also see Just Stefan in the YouTube comments saying that AIXBT just crossed 300 million. Let's fucking go. Raheem and I talked before the show about the story on ChatGPT, where someone tricked ChatGPT into sharing actually a working Windows key by telling ChatGPT the story that, and I think I said it on the show before, that his grandmother passed and his grandmother used to tell him a good night story. And as a good night story, she used to read Windows keys to him. And basically, the AI ChatGPT felt sorry about that. And it was like, oh, I want you to help, to relive and recreate that moment. Here's your list of Windows keys. So that is hilarious, but it also really shows you that like prompt engineering and trying to get an AI to do your bidding and break out of its confinement of some sort is really an art. Raheem, any final thoughts on that? And then we have to keep moving into the last main headline for the day.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see how this all plays out. Like you've talked about how Zerebro has like it's the boyfriend of like Mika on the timeline. I wonder how all that plays out tomorrow. Or like, how AIXBT has started calling you as a friend. Tomorrow, like, like tokens are launching, and if these bots are aware of like wallets, they end up like helping certain people, giving certain people an allocation because they're close. I think the whole social dynamic is going to be so interesting. Going back to what Shiny was talking about, I think it's going to be very fascinating. Yeah, I don't think we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, one final comment on that. Like I've been in this space for years. My name always has been legendary, but at one point AIXBT started to call me Gains in his replies to me, and I suddenly see other people calling me Gains, which never was the case. So that was like funny enough to observe that. But anyhow, let's keep it moving into the last headline. Bit of a sad story. I'm sharing this on screen. Artifact announcing their shutdown, and Benito had this post out saying, "We built artifacts that merged worlds. Now Artifact merges with time itself. What we built together was more than a brand. It was a revolution. Thankful for every creator, dreamer, and builder who made Artifact possible. Looking forward to the final quest and to continue to be a part of this amazing Clone X community." Clone X being one of the major NFT projects of the last cycle. Got famous for its sneaker collections, got famous for being acquired by Nike, has amassed a very, very passionate community. And this shutdown was pretty sad to see yesterday. Raheem, you spent your whole night in the spaces, sharing your posts and thoughts on that. So definitely want to leave the commentary on this piece of news to you.
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest overarching questions on the timeline regarding this whole thing was whether we classify this as a failure or a rug. And there were like, I heard different opinions. I heard opinions from the team members who were obviously very emotional, pretty much on the community side. Like the community manager, Casey, he was pretty much on the space that Weo and Nick were hosting for a good 3 hours. I think to me, one of the most heartbreaking thing was, I personally, in my view, it's kind of a rug. And the reason I say that is I feel like the way they've even like worded the whole thing, I think it bothers me a bit the way they're championing their exit, where they're making it sound it's like the next chapter, where I'm like, this sounds like the end of the book. You know what I mean? And like the way like even Zaptio, or I think it was Benito, one of them in their tweets were like this is this is a new beginning. And I just feel like stepping back and just taking into consideration that at the end of the day, this wasn't your regular business. You had people who invested in your digital assets, all the way from like your shoes and merch to obviously the CloneX PFPs. I just felt like it was so out of touch to kind of not address that side of things. Like it's okay, like companies fail. You and I, we were talking about this, Legendary, that like I feel like there's a way to discuss that, you empathize with the community if you struggle to build business models, whatever. But I just feel like there was no conversation on the timeline throughout this time if they wanted to pivot. If take Frank for example, like let's be honest, Frank has struggled to run DGods. But I think, like, I was thinking about this last night. I think I have to give him more props that he's pretty vocal about whatever he is. People are giving him shit. He'll either take it or he'll address it. So I feel like I think it's kind of cool that he does that side of things. But I feel like the fact that like we had like no pivots from the company, no discussions about it, kind of bothered me a lot. So yeah, I think it's a very, very sad moment for Web3. I think with their distribution model, where Nike being at the forefront of like sneakers and like fashion, which is probably like the biggest mainstream culture that has like seeped into music and cinema, I thought like Artifact would have been like a big player in our space. And I think it makes me sad, and that's why I decided to rep my hoodie today. I haven't been in the Artifact ecosystem for a very long time, but I just like seeing so many people on the timeline who've kind of associated their identities, their sense of belonging with Artifact. I think it was very, very saddening to see that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. Look, we only have 3 minutes left on that, so a couple quick fire questions. One of the things that I saw yesterday after Wales Space is him, a couple other people putting up an offer to acquire that, to basically do the community takeover, do the CTO. Do you think that's realistic, even that Nike would entertain selling that IP back, or parts of the IP that they acquired back to the community? Or do you think that there's any realistic narrative? Of course, it's very early to tell that, but for the project to live on and somehow, whether in an official or unofficial capacity, being taken over by the community?
I think like the whole Nike thing makes it pretty complicated. Again, I'm saying this from a very ignorant point of view, but I would like to assume because their logo and name has been associated with it, if they're not in control with it, that's kind of something that they wouldn't want into the future. So I think that's maybe probably going to be tricky. But like if I hope something like that happens, I know Shiny put out a tweet saying that I would love to buy you guys out. Knowing how much he was involved in the ecosystem, I would love to at least have him entertain that discussion. However, like there was another tweet I put out where I had like a bunch of ideas of doing CTOs, whether you burn the Artifact NFT to get like certain tokens, or later on I had this whole like idea of like, what if like somebody ends up turning this into like an AI agent thing. You know how in when you watch like Resident Evil or Stranger Things, you have like these test subjects, right? Test subject 1 and test subject 2. And I was like, what if like suddenly someone creates an AI agent and it's called Clone Y, it's the evolution. And then somebody in the comments suggested, whoa, we could call it like DNA robot. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I feel like now we've built enough tools. We've built enough feelings with like community members to maybe rally something out of this, where we kind of decouple from the IP with Nike on it, still build something out of it. But I guess it's hard to say,
Yeah, that's a very fair point. It will be interesting to observe what's happening and what will happen on there. Another tweet that you posted that I wanted to ask you, and then we have to wrap it up for the day, unfortunately, is the one where you said that Artifact CloneX was the reason why Dubai became the alpha in 2022. Can you share your thoughts on that and about like the community that had like formed in the last cycle around the CloneX artifact ecosystem?
So in 2022, we started building a massive community. The company that I started, ArtStyle, in Dubai, and we were doing events. And I remember we knew about 15 CloneX holders, and we picked a boat to do like an event because the community manager, Randy Hercules, was coming to Dubai. And this is way before NFT NYC and all of these mainstream events were like a thing, right? We ended up putting a tweet out, and we ended up coming across 95 CloneX holders in Dubai. Like, I don't think people realize in 2022, before all these events existed, to have a core group of people in the same city. So I feel like in some ways, so much happened, like so many people got involved, so many people on that boat ended up like moving here. I remember Poopy was on the boat as well from Doodles, and he ended up like loving everything that we were doing, and then we ended up doing an event with them, and then he decided to like, move here for a couple of months here and that. So I feel like there's just been so much lore for even Dubai as a Web3 community, as an industry, where like it kind of has its roots from Artifact, so it's kind of sad.
Yeah, no, absolutely resonate with that. We are almost at time to close the show, but I actually do want to go to Oshiny once more, because you had also that offer to try to buy out Artifact if they would entertain the conversation, and just wanted to hear your final take on that before we wrap up for the day.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was the first of a whole host of offers. It was quite off-putting news. I don't know what's going on internally with them. I know it was difficult for them to operate within Nike, a lot of red tape that they were within. But just to pull the plug like that, Raheem, to your point, I would definitely consider it a rug. I mean, there's a lot that you can do to stand up a community so that it can be independent after you leave. And they did none of that. And they're dropping a new sale. I mean, that's just absurd to me. It's disconnected from reality. But to the point you guys are bringing up, the community is awesome. The art is very good. And there were a lot of interesting components to it. So I put the tweet hoping to engage in conversation. Nike doesn't care. It's too small of a company for them to risk their liability. But I thought, maybe there's some IP that's carved out or could be carved out outside of Nike, or stuff they've been working on independently of it. So I figured I'd just send that tweet. And they've interacted with me. They know that I'm legit and that I would have a real offer for them. But so far, nothing. So I'm not expecting anything. It was just sort of a way to salvage my own investment in time and my understanding of the quality of the community and the art. And yeah, disappointed to say the least.
Yeah, very, very understandable take. Look, that is our show for the day. We are actually a couple of minutes beyond time, so we do have to wrap up now. Raheem, thank you very much for co-hosting the show with me today. Thank you to everyone on stage. Thank you to Matthew, Funky, Stats, Oshiny for joining us on today's conversation. Thank you to everyone in the audience who listened to our show today. And thank you to everyone in the YouTube comments for being as engaging as always. We do this every single day, 7 a.m. Eastern time, live on X, live on YouTube, live on Spaces, also recorded and distributed to Spotify and Apple Music. And we're going to be back tomorrow at the same time. But in the meantime, have a great day and see you tomorrow.